today. Now, the term cancel culture is everywhere.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture. Cancel culture.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture.
Comedy for me, it filled in that other side. And as I'm still weaving these two worlds together, it's a great way to learn a lot about yourself. I've said this a few times. It's like, if you want to attain enlightenment, sit down at a desk and try to write a joke. Your mind will go completely blank.
That's great. It's like morality as a word has become a dirty word. Hello, everyone. This is Leslie Powers here with another episode of Dissolving the Divide. Hey, Derek.
Hey, Leslie. Bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour.
We got Owen Hunt in the house.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to have him and looking forward to this one for a while because been following his work for a minute. Good friends with Mario West. And been impressed with just some of the sketches you've done. You got a variety of things going on. Comedian, producer of comedy shows, hosting of, most recently roasting of, or roasted rather, but yeah, to be more specific, he is a true blue collar mystic and Mr. Bootsy Greenwood, man. Pleasure to have you on, brother. What's good?
I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Leslie and Derek, for having me. I love what you're doing. I love the solutions-focused idea, dissolving the divide. Blessed are the peacemakers. Mm-hmm. I'm on board 100%. It's been more and more difficult to hold that stance, right? Like talking about the polarization and the extremes that are so alluring on both sides. But I really love what y'all are doing, and I'm happy to be here chatting with you today. Maybe we can come up with some cool solutions ourselves.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Glad you're here. Yeah, taking time out of your busy life. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess because I've been writing down some notes and looking at some videos, and this idea kind of stemmed off from, another video that I produced and just like going into like all the stuff that I've been so detached from being out in France and stuff. And like things are so much more amplified in America as far as like the polarizations and things just kind of like made up sometimes and people are like butting heads over like a lot of trivial things that are really unnecessary. And it's just kind of plays into the whole divide and conquer strategies and tactics, unfortunately. So in today's age, we have more than ever. There's been different forms of it in the past, but like people, especially in the public eye, are being like punished in forms of loss of jobs and public humiliation and like partial or total boycotting of whatever feasible forms are possible through a lot of it's social justice warriors, and a lot of it's coming through social media and all this stuff. And it's like all because something that this person being accused of like did in the past. Sometimes they dig up like obscure things, or something in the present that could be considered trivial or arbitrary or whatever. So yeah. Oh, and I've been really interested to like see as far as like your experience, and because you've also like coached people, I want to say as well, like you're into a lot of interesting things and probably spoken to thousands of people and all the shows that you've done on the comedy circuits. So yeah, we wanted to have you on today to kind of just like, catch your version of just like your observations, because we understand like, the mystic side of things that, we got to step into that, observational objectively, the objective observer, if you will. So,
Yeah, I think that's really important. My background is pretty extensive in TV and film production. I started out like part-time in like 2004, but I started to become a producer for the first time in 2014, which gave me a ton of skills and the ability to, out of necessity, solve problems very quickly and creatively. Whatever it was, I had very demanding people that I was working for. and I was in the prank world, so I had to be very on my toes. And it's probably one of the more challenging jobs that I've had on a film set was casting for pranks, because you have to get people to the place under a guise that is not what it actually is. They can't know that they're being filmed. If they see one wire or anything that might tip them off when they walk on, then they're all of a sudden the whole thing's burned. So it was a lot of coordination, a lot of thought and strategy, and yeah, a lot of deception as well. You know, a lot of things that I'm maybe not necessarily proud about, but nothing, you know, nothing too immoral, dark, or or twisted or anything. For the most part, 99.99% of things, people were ecstatic to be a part of it, and it was fun and a great experience. Just those one or two times where things, you know, didn't go all that great, but I've had the opportunity to see things in the production world from the inside of the beast, so to speak. So I know exactly what is happening when you get up closer to the top. And then some of those experiences are what led me to wanting to do my own content and do it myself, because maybe I didn't feel so great about what I was doing and what I was supporting and propping up by working in film. You know, a lot of people have tremendous amounts of pride about their job in the film and media industry, and I understand that. It's great to be part of a team. I love the projects, I love the challenges and all of that. But when you step back and see what you're actually helping to support, I think it's not something to be proud of. And in fact, it's something to be skeptical and maybe very critical of. So, you know, not a big fan of manipulating and brainwashing people with propaganda, right?
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, that begs the question, I guess, to expand a little bit more on some of the immorality, you know, and coercion that you've seen in that industry.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my own perspective and my own job, you know, basically we would more or less catfish people for specific jobs to come and work. And as long as we paid them the money and everything like that we said that we would do, then from a legal standpoint, it was fine. But, you know, just like I would have to impersonate like a photographer for the day, you know, or something like that, to talk to someone and be like, I'm a photographer, I'm going to be out at this thing and we're having a shoot at this place. And, you know, just spin a yarn for people to come out under a specific, you know, they might be coming out for a brand ambassador position for a sandwich truck, you know, or something like that. As simple as that. Right. And then all of a sudden someone's hanging off a building, you know, and we're catching their reactions. Or they may have come to an art gallery and then a car crashes through the wall. You know what I mean? Like, we did a bunch of different things. So, and some of them, you know, people got their reputations, you know, were harmed as a result of some of it, you know, mine included. Some, you know, some days I'm like, am I being pranked? What what is going on? So, yeah, I mean, but I say all that to say that it's ultimately people have a goal, and people are sometimes used as resources to accomplish whatever those goals are. In the world of comedy, there's a lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of savagery, I would even say. It can be a very mean-spirited industry. It can be incredibly serious as well. You know, like a lot of the threads are like such and such, no jokes. Like, don't make a joke in the thread. This is serious, which is very counterintuitive. It would seem like a paradox if you're coming into, you know, that world, thinking, oh, this will be fun. Comedy, we're here to make people laugh. Yay. And then you come in and people are very serious about their brand, their style, what it is that they're trying to put forth as it is also an art form. So it's a weird paradoxical balance there. And, you know, when you get up into these big studio groups and stuff like that, you see, you know, ultimately, you know, it's about money, and the way that they organize things is very clever and strategic on their end. If you're doing a film, they create a brand new business for that film so that you can, if you sue the film, it only has the budget for that film in there. There's no money in that business, right? It's like a Russian doll, and then they've got another, another owner of that that is, ultimately the studio is paying it, but that's not. You'll never get to the studio, legally speaking, right? They've just got teams and teams of lawyers that kind of guard all that whole thing from the project end. So it's crafted very, very neatly and specifically for a reason. And I mean, it's smart. It's their due diligence, I guess, to do that. But ultimately, it's just not something that I felt great about supporting. And after I got burned a few times, I was like, well, maybe it's time to do my own thing. And it's been a lot harder than I had anticipated, if I'm being honest. You don't know what's involved until you get into the thing. So, here I am a few years in and still learning a lot, but producing some cool stuff. And I'm going to have new sketches and stuff coming out all this whole next year with my friend JoJo White, who's an awesome performer and another stand-up comic.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think what you said about your observation that people are used as resources, right, for other people's goals or agendas, and that making money is often the motivator at the expense sometimes of other moral considerations, like telling people the truth, or there's an assumption that people will forgive the trickery, like the means are worth the outcome somehow, like whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some questions there around that. And when other people are, in this industry and are being used for a certain skill or for a function, they are also dispensable, I would think. And then the media plays a big role, in terms of influencing the perception, like the public perception of people. So kind of bringing this back to this idea of cancel culture that is sort of underlying some of Derek's inspiration for the show. Do we really know what's true, when we're looking at social media or regular media about, things that are happening in the industry? There's these trends of just like shutting people down, demonizing someone's character, changing storylines. It's a very confusing world.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's definitely a smart place to begin to start asking some questions, because, on the one hand, you want people to have a platform, and I'm an advocate of free speech, of course, that's number one for a reason, but at the same time, you've got people who take advantage of other people, use them as resources, coerce and extort them in order to get their way. I mean, so it's definitely a nuanced topic and nuanced subject when we kind of start to go down this hill of cancel culture, because, some people are monsters, right? Like they should be stopped, Harvey Weinstein, right? Like is a great example. And, you hear these things come out about him. But again, back to your point that you just made, like, how do you know what all is true? How do you know who else is involved in this? And will that come undone? Will that start to unwrap and unravel? Or will this one person just wind up being sort of the scapegoat for everybody who's participating in whatever this is? And then all of a sudden they just get off scot-free and they throw that one person under the bus. It's hard to know.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and it's hard to understand like how long it's been perpetuated and by whom as well, and like both parties as well, including some of the people crying victim the whole time. But yeah, aside from that, yeah, it's just I just don't understand what's going on with media and movies these days. You just had an interview with Lark and Rose. They did a great movie called The Jones Plantation. Their budget was $50,000. And you have these, $250 million blunders these days, and they're pushing certain propaganda things for those who have the eyes to see. It's not being a bigot, it's not being anti-feminine or whatever kind of phobia people want to kind of shield, against, any kind of criticism towards good art and good writing and good comedy and all these things. And it sucks, people like the classic one is Dave Chappelle, right? you know, he was canceled and all this stuff. He had a Netflix contract that I guess he didn't get to go and do another show or whatever, right? And it's just weird. People are like digitally throwing stones at him, like, back in the old days when, it's ostensible sometimes when people are so triggered off of things that they don't understand, and there's like this mob mentality behind it. You hear this, if anyone's watched any kind of video regarding cancel culture, you'll hear like, oh, this mob mentality is taking over. And what is going on with this type of have you noticed like this seems more new than something that's been going on for decades, right?
I think it is more new. I think the internet is one of the reasons why so many people can pay attention. And maybe before, I was actually hanging out with some friends last night. We watched an older Bill Hicks special, and I love Bill Hicks. He's probably my favorite comic of all time, or one of them. But honestly, some of the things just didn't age well. You know what I mean? And that's just part of it. And and it's funny that they, because it's like some people are watching, and so that is a consequence of comedy and the way that we share. Those are that's gonna happen sometimes. Like some of the stuff that Dave Chappelle said 10 years ago, in 10 or 15 years, people are probably gonna cringe at a lot of that stuff down the road, and that just is what it is. It's strange and it's weird, because especially when you sort of idolize someone like Bill Hicks or George Carlin or whomever. But it's like now you see articles about how George Orwell was a misogynist or whatever. And I think what's funny about cancel culture and how you can really spot who's really upset and has a reason to lead a charge is like, what are they doing? Like, how are they trying to dismiss the argument? Are they arguing with the argument? Are they presenting evidence for a different solution? Or are they just attacking the character of the individual? Because when it comes down to it, if you're just doing ad hominem attacks on people, like you're not debunking anything, right? Like you're just talking about, oh, well, George Orwell was a misogynist. Well, he was living in a time where if you took any man from that time, they would in today's time be considered a misogynist, just the way that the culture was, right? It's like, I think Bill Burr has a bit where he's like, yeah, like some 80-year-old NBA owner guy, it comes out as it turns out he was racist. He's like, well, what did you expect him to be? He's from a different time. The guy was born in like 1920. You know what I mean? It's like, he just, what do you expect? What do you expect from 1994 from Bill Hicks? For him to understand the nuances of our time and what we're dealing with, and what do you expect for the comedians now to be able to try to judge what the future landscape is going to look like in 10 or 15 or 20 years? It's impossible. It's
it's like there's these knee-jerk reactions based on emotional inflammation, and there's like cultural things or media-based things I see as like spurring it on, feeding it and encouraging it, and people are kind of going off in little mobs, like Derek said, against certain people. Some, and I think it's important, like you said, to distinguish between the person and the behavior, or the words and their truth, as opposed to just like cutting people off at the knees, especially for, things that were said or done in earlier parts of the revolution. I mean, none of us are perfect, right? We all grow often through our mistakes. So there's these interesting issues around, just it's like ghosting people. And I see that the cancel culture is a censorship. It's like, we don't like what you're saying or doing, so we're just gonna, push you out of the club. You're going to be, kicked out in not even get a chance to share, and we're gonna like destroy your reputation so that nothing you say is believable. It becomes so extreme, where a lot of people's rights, I think, get violated, and the opportunity for dialogue and conflict resolution are removed.
Yeah, it's a weird problem too, because sometimes these people who are canceled are actually wind up getting bigger as a result of that cancellation, right? So you have to understand the energetic aspects of this as well. Like, take somebody like Shane Gillis, who was kicked off of Saturday Night Live because they found an old podcast of him using a slur. And because of that, he got kicked off Saturday Night Live, but then he wound up, on Joe Rogan's podcast, and now he has Netflix specials and things like that. I think there's always, if you're smart and if you're resourceful yourself, then there's always a way to be successful. There's always a way to move forward and a way to find what it is that you're looking for. And it's not always easy probably to find that, but I do believe that there's a way. And it's interesting now because I think a lot of people are still, even though they know it's a different time, they are still trying to go about things in an old-fashioned way. And I'll give you an example. In the comedy world, there you've got a line out the door of people who go do an open mic on Sunday night or whatever to try to basically audition to try to get spots at a comedy club. Well, if you get that job and you wind up hosting those shows at that comedy club, you're going to be opening up for TikTokers whose audience is comedy illiterate, and the booker doesn't care that they're not funny. They're just, the people are in the seats for a meet and greet because they saw that person on TikTok, right? So you're living in a 2023 world, or 2024 we're going into, but you're playing by the rules from 2005. So how does that benefit you as a comedian or as a personality or whatever it is that you define yourself? You're playing an old game that you can't win, instead of living in the world that is, the situation and circumstances that we have now, and navigating that in a way that you can win. And so I think, you just have to think outside the box and be creative, whatever it is that you're doing, and try to find the right audience and connect with them directly, as opposed to hoping that this outdated system, this, media giant monster that is really kind of going extinct, falls by the wayside. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people who know how to look for it.
Yeah. Finding your audience through other platforms and expanding the options, right? Not playing into the mainstream media power game, I guess.
Yeah, the people who are the most popular and have the most clout are the ones who are making content directly for their audience, no matter who that person is. It's like, if Shane Gillis would have stayed on Saturday Night Live, I don't think as many people would know who he is.
Yeah, interesting point. It's not always a disadvantage. It might be a push for someone's career to really become even more authentic and independent.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could take Matt Rife as a more recent example, which a lot of people are really upset with his special. I didn't watch it. I'm not really a big fan of him, but
did you catch the phrase that he was kind of called out for or whatever?
Yeah, the joke wasn't offensive to me. It's basically the old joke. Like, it's just like a redux of the old joke. Like, what do you tell a woman with two black eyes joke? You know that joke?
I'm not too familiar with it, but yeah.
It's not a great joke, but I'll tell you what it is. I certainly didn't write it, but what do what do you tell a woman with two black eyes? Nothing. You already told her twice. Basically, it's just a redux of that joke, which is, it's in bad taste, right?
Yeah.
But why would you be canceled for saying that? It's a dumb joke, you know what I mean? But I think that what he was trying to do was reach a different audience through his special, which was an interesting tactic. And I don't know if it's going to work like he wants it to, but if you'll notice how much more attention he got as a result, I mean, it was a win for him. There's no such thing as bad press when it comes down to it, right? Like, in the idea, and if you know Maria West, you know, she talks a lot about reality transurfing. That's kind of my bread and butter when it comes to spirituality as well. But the idea of a pendulum, and that there's just as much power in a negative opinion as there is in a positive one. Look at Trump 2016, probably still to this day. I don't think we've seen a better example of someone who uses negative attention and energy to their advantage more than Donald Trump did. It's just pretty incredible what he was able to do. You know, I'm personally not a fan of him. I don't vote for Trump, but I've only voted once in my life, and it was for Joe Jorgensen. But I'll never forget. Yeah, right. But I'll never forget the day when Trump won, and I walked into my bar job then, because I was like, I live in a very liberal town, and like, it's all, you know, a lot of like just very, you know, progressive people and I mean, it just felt like a funeral at work, and everyone was so bummed out. And I'm like, well, now you guys know what it feels like. My candidate loses every single time. Like, but
how do you differentiate, censorship from cancel culture? I think they're similar but different. How would you say?
Yeah, I think they're definitely different. Cancel culture is just going after people because you didn't like something that they said, it seems like. But I do think there are some people that need to be stopped, not because of something that they said, more likely because of their actions. You know, when someone like Harvey Weinstein, or what happened at Penn State, you know, like that kind of stuff, that needs to be called out, and it needs to stop. You know, if someone's abusive or treats people poorly, at the same time, what are you going to run a background check on anybody that comes and does, you know, your show? I mean, it's very nuanced. But, you know, as far as censorship is different, but they do kind of overlap as well. There does seem to be a certain group, and I see, honestly, what I see in the comedy world, because this is a very small world, you know, there's not a lot of people who are either dumb enough or masochistic enough to jump in,
or brave
jump
enough
on stage. Yeah, well, I think sometimes the audience is more brave than the comedians are. You know, if you go to an open mic, then you are a very brave soul, very courageous to go in there and watch that cringe. But yeah, I just see. I don't know. I see it in smaller in pockets, right? Where it's like political too, where it'll be like a small group of people who do a lot of booking, and they are going to decide or push, you know, who's going to get booked and who's not going to. And in an industry where you really need to stand out, and there are many ways to do that. Obviously, you can physically stand out, or stand out because of your politics or your gender or your sexual preference or whatever. But ideally, you should stand out because you're good at what you do, and whatever it is. Obviously, you know, and that's another thing too. It's like, as someone who books, like, I don't want just all straight white males on my show. That's boring, you know. Like, I don't want that. I want to see different people, females, males, whatever. You know, a lot of different ideas and perspectives considered on a show. I don't want just the same, you know, dude who's going to do the two black eyes joke. You know, it's boring and it's in bad taste. Anyway, so I think a lot of people kind of out themselves just because they're doing stuff that they know will get a reaction, as opposed to something that's a genuine piece of art, right? Like, or something that's personal from them, as what their perspective is. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard to develop that and actually offer a real perspective. But I think that's what the audience wants. The audience wants a hero, not a comedian. There's a line out the door of people who are funny for 20 minutes. You know, it's not easy to do. I'm not trying to minimize it, but there's a lot of people who can do it. You know, so, but that's not what people are thirsty for. You know, they want somebody to go up on stage and say the thing they are afraid to say, but we're all thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that. And
right.
I love what you mentioned in the beginning before we recorded, but and it ties into what I wrote, for the show as far as just, like comedians, like they're, I don't know, it can be people's sanctuary. It's beyond just, entertainment and escapism because, a lot of people want to hear what the untold truths of things, and like this is how shit really is and how fucked up it is, but they could put a comedic twist on it. And what do we have today of people kind of trying to, it's like we're walking on eggshells, or we're kind of curtailing, certain hard, punchlines, whatever, because of, we don't want to be canceled, right? Because there's that element that people have in the back of their minds now, it seems. And that's kind of, part of the gist of, this, you know, conversation. Well, not the gist, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I love the fact that, like comedy is, it's like that trickster energy, right? And it's holding a mirror of reality for all to see, and this is what it is. And those brave souls that have fucking done that, the Carlins, the Hickses and Chappelles, and Eddie Murphy did some great shit, classic stuff. That was like, that's the highest grossing income stand-up comedy of all time, and that was in like the 80s. But yeah, anyways,
Yeah.
anything that pops to mind with what I just said there, or?
Well, you kind of cut out for a second, but I think I caught the gist of.
Oh shit.
No, yeah, sorry about that.
No, no worries.
But yeah, I mean, well, again, Eddie Murphy, that's a great example. You can watch Raw and see how that aged. You know what I mean? Versus like Steve Martin and how that aged. Because Steve Martin is this like playful, goofy person that he doesn't offend or push really buttons at all. Whereas Eddie Murphy, like that was what he was doing. He had his, finger on the pulse of culture, and he was tapping it. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's something to definitely consider and think about, as you go out there. What is it that you want to be remembered for or by? Because it's gonna follow you no matter what. So it's definitely something worth considering. But at the same time, I don't think you can let that stop you either, because it's so refreshing when people hear that truth that they are thirsting for, that they want to say themselves, but are afraid to say it out loud. And for me as a comedian, especially when you get a larger audience, you can be more risky. But when you are starting out in your first, kind of getting your career going, you're making friends in the community. It's a small community. The people that book are mostly comedians themselves. So how honest do you want to be? I get off stage, I'm going to be nice to everybody, and if they don't like what I have to say on stage, well, I hope they don't take it personally, but that doesn't mean they won't. They very well might. So there's this whole paradox and this whole sort of issue to navigate, where it's like, how far will I let myself go right now so that I can continue to get booked, because you want to get booked on shows, and the people who are booking are the other comedians. They're your peers. It's not like somebody else is doing that. It's like we're all kind of having to create our own world and our own reality. And one of the things that I've done, and I think it's been very beneficial and valuable for me, and as well as our community where I live in Athens, is gas went to $5 a gallon here in Georgia, which is outrageous. I mean, it's like probably $10 a gallon in California at the time, a couple of years ago.
You're competing with us, yeah.
Right. And this was a couple of years ago, in maybe 2021, right after the pandemic. And there wasn't a whole lot of comedy going on. Everything kind of fell off the map in 2020 with the pandemic. Everything stopped, just all stopped. And then, whenever the world kind of came back to life, I really did everything that I could to try to support that. I started creating rooms and hosting shows and producing shows so that there would be shows, and then connecting other people who were doing other shows in our community and posting and publishing all that stuff on Instagram. And the way that I kind of think of that is, you know, back to the reality Transurfing book, the idea of outer intention, or if you're into economics, you could think of the invisible hand of the market, but you could think of the invisible hand of the market in a sense of energy, not necessarily financially speaking, but what is it that people want? How can I serve people? Or how can I serve the muse that is the art form that I really want to, you know, pursue? So as someone trying to, you know, support the muse, as maybe cheesy to some as that may sound, you know, I would just take all the shows, post those, publish those, make it available online, and start. And the reason why I had a roast and people roasted me was because for an entire year I've been posting on Instagram all the shows that are in our area, and I've been hosting my own and producing my own shows, and I'm going to have I'm going to have 8 shows a month or more starting next year that I'm going to be responsible for booking. And so because of that, because I'm giving and nurturing the scene or the community or whatever we want to call that, I think that has given me more opportunities, and other people want to give me opportunities because I've given opportunities to them. And, you know, as we kind of go out there and dissolve this divide, it's like, how can we, you know, put ourselves in a position to serve what the needs of the people are that we are trying to connect with, right? And truly connect with them, as opposed to trying to like convince them of something or sell something to them, right? And the more we do that, the more I think we're rewarded as a result of doing that. Again, it's kind of a cheesy thing to say, like to serve the muse, or outer intention is kind of, there are cheesier ways to say it even, you know, serving God or your purpose or your higher destiny or your calling or whatever, you know, but they're all relevant.
And a lot of people may not like what we see as our calling. You know, there's parallels to like the truth community and truth speakers and natural law teachers. You know, we are playing a game with people feeling offended or not. You know, it's like this social shame game, or this dance around how direct to be, how blunt to be, how offensive to be. I mean, look, Mark Passio made his tagline, "Get as offended as you like," you know, recognizing, you know, in his mind that truth is more important than your feelings, you know. Right. And we're in a world now where people are really highlighting the importance of their feelings. And I think that puts, you know, truth speakers and comedians and, you know, people who are passionate about topics and, you know, wanting to serve people who don't even see their own enslavement. Right. It puts us in opposition almost to the people we're trying to serve because we're offending them, you know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very difficult, you know. I think that it's always kind of our responsibility to adjust the message so that we can reach those people in a way, you know, not to pander, you know. I like Mark Passio, but I think he's like sometimes too harsh, in my opinion, right? Like, it doesn't matter what I think of Mark Passio. He's going to keep doing his thing. He's a bull in the china shop. Go get him. You know, everybody's got their own message and their own style and their own swagger, or lack thereof, I guess, you know, depending on where you sit. Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, like, I want to connect. I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken through my journey into all of this, and learning the truth and wanting to share it, and ruining Thanksgivings and Christmas holidays with my family by talking about the Federal Reserve or whatever. You know what I mean? But what I've learned is the more that I can connect to people, as opposed to trying to convince them of anything, the more likely they are to hear my perspective. And again, like the idea of outer intention or frailing, which is do unto others. It's the golden rule. It's the same thing, right? Like, let them speak, let them share, ask them a question, and earnestly listen to what they have to say, instead of just assuming that you know better than they know, and that they're wrong and fuck your feelings or whatever. Then maybe sit down and seek to understand, then to be understood, like it says in the 7 habits of highly effective people. What is it that they need? You know, when someone calls me, we have a cleaning business, and when someone calls me and needs a cleaning, I know that they need a cleaning. That's the basic surface level. But what I try to listen for is, what is it that they really need? Do they need convenience? Do they need discretion? Do they need trustworthiness? Are they afraid that they're going to be stolen from? Do they need, do they need their schedule accommodated? What is it? Is it their dog, their cat that they're concerned about? Because it's more than just cleaning. They can call any number of people and have that done. But if we try to listen and read between the lines of what a person is actually saying, what their needs are, then I think it's a lot easier to serve them. Then you can give them the message. I mean, I don't care if it's flat earth that wakes somebody up. Somebody might watch a mud flood documentary just out of curiosity. And then all of a sudden, they start learning about the banking system, or, the alternative histories, or whatever. It doesn't matter. I think asking the questions is the most important part too. And if you notice, a lot of great comedy is really just asking questions and poking and probing around to try to find and discover, an alternative take or an idea or perspective that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. So I think the onus is on us. It's like, as a comedian, I'm never going to blame the audience, even if it is their fault. It's still my fault, even if it's their fault, because I can't just like lay it on them and be like, well, they're just a bunch of idiots. They're stupid. They don't understand my sapiosexual joke or whatever. Like, I'm not going to do a highbrow joke in a trailer bar. You know what I mean? That's my fault. I didn't read the room. So, and sometimes it is just tough, and sometimes dealing with people is tough, but you can't blame them. You have to look inside of yourself and tweak what your message is, and how can you serve them, and how can you connect. And I think that's a really big part of it, is just listening and adjusting the message, calibrating based on, what that is in the moment. And that's always going to be changing. It is difficult to do, though.
Yeah, I like how you put that, calibrating to the audience, to the setting, and being adaptable rather than super rigid in ourselves, and being smart, being strategic, being open, listening, dialoguing, being sensitive to some degree, while also choosing what is most important, to share, I guess. Yeah. I've had this question, listening a lot to Mark Passio, and I'm like, okay, at what point is it ever doing harm when it's just hurting someone's feelings, and at what point does that become a wrongdoing?
It's a good question, and I think that's something that we each kind of have to figure out for ourselves. For me, I'm try to think backwards, like, what is the outcome that I want, and how can I get to that place? Sometimes you can't, sometimes you just can't. Mm-hmm. And that's okay too. Just take the L. But, as well, I really don't see the point in alienating anyone. Like, the back to the top, blessed are the peacemakers. Like, some of the most discriminated people are people who are trying to ask real questions and share real information with people, and they're the most discriminated against as far as a minority goes, and that's frustrating and difficult to navigate. Like, so I'm thinking from that perspective, how do you loop yourself in and connect with people who are maybe in that status quo paradigm? And that's kind of where they live. But how do you connect with them and share your perspective that's wildly different in a non-threatening way to them, so that they can kind of pick up on? Because like these buzzwords that just anti-vaxxer or conspiracy theorist or whatever start to be thrown around, and they're pejorative, right? Like they're an instant insult and intended to just disqualify whatever the person who's accused of being, whatever that, that could be slanderous. That's a kind of it's kind of its own slur in a way, if you will. And to
Lie.
just to like make somebody kind of go away and and make their opinions invalid. So it's definitely a challenge and a stretch. But one of the things that Larkin said on the show when I interviewed him was that, you know, propaganda back in the day, back in Edward Bernays' day, it used to be so clever and so smart and so unperceivable. But now, if you watch the news, it's so overtly, outrageously absurd that it's like we're watching parody die. You know, it's like you can't even exaggerate this stuff. It's so far off.
Yeah, there's
And I
no
think
subtlety at all. There's no
no.
finesse. Not finesse.
No, it's crazy. No, and that was one of his kind of white pills, if you will, on the show, is that, you know, the propaganda has gotten so outrageous that they just like the whole NFL field is end racism, you know, and like you turn on CNN and they tell you exactly what to think and so overtly about whatever it is, the conflict out in, you know, out in the Middle East or whatever. Like, it's so clear what side they're on that they're doing a terrible job. And I think no one, well, that's too general, but I think a lot of people are seeing through the bullshit as a result of that, because it's just so obvious, the propaganda. And so I think when people want real answers to questions, they're not looking at mainstream sources anymore. They're having these conversations in private, which is good. That's what we should be doing anyway.
Right. Yeah, our politicians have become caricatures. You know, it's sort of like, is this real? I mean, I've been feeling like that for a really long time. I'm like, this isn't even for real. Like, they're not even real people, you know? They're just caricatures in this weird play. And don't want to believe it.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, if you don't mind me, Leslie. But you know, I was thinking about this as well. Just, you know, the fact, you know, the cancel culture, it's, you know, we're obviously, this whole segment so far has been mostly directed towards, you know, people that be facing backlash from the public, that are just, you know, in the public eye, the people's, you know, the people's champions, the celebrities and all that stuff. You know, one little slip up, we got you, mob mentality, smash them kind of thing. And I don't know, it seems like these people are like, you know, like they're uh like a dog with drool, you know, like they're just like licking their lips, licking their chops, waiting for the next one. Because, and I don't know if you noticed this, but the landscape of YouTube, you know, there's so many views and like so much attention drawn towards this drama. And now it's like the anti-woke people, you know, all the conservatives are like, you know, bashing this side, and like, you know, all the liberals or, you know, cancel culture kind of side of this and that are like, oh, these conspiracy theorists or all these Trump people and blah blah blah. You know, those are part of these dialectics and divisions between people, unfortunately. I mean, it's so fucking like there's the Gordian knot involved with that, if you guys understand the psychology of that one. But as far as like, here's where I'm coming with the government ties. And like, we all kind of understand that, you know, both sides lie, but and some of the propaganda of both sides. Yet, you know, like, we don't hear cancel culture except for Donald Trump these days, really, which it might have been part of, you know, like the you know, the surgence of this cancel culture thing, because, you know, people were so outraged of this guy, you know, and this and that. But as far as like people's actually being, you know, their rights being infringed upon like on a daily basis type of thing, or even McDonald's, you know, shoving propaganda in them, lying to them of like this tasty burger in their advertisement, but it looks like, you know, a crap of shit, you know, in real life. It just seems like people don't have their fucking priorities straight, as far as like, you know, pointing the fingers at whatever the hell, and like not really taking responsibility of their own like thoughts, emotions, and actions, and being kind of pulled, you know, through their heartstrings, you know, with this, you know, emotional mind control, as Leslie was alluding to earlier. So I just don't understand how, you know, people's, you know, attention has been diverted towards like, oh, we got to focus on the negative sides of, you know, celebrities. and whatever, instead of like actual people that are putting in certain laws and, you know, rewriting, you know, Common Core education, which is kind of part of the, you know, causal factors of why things have gotten this bad, it seems, because a part of the education is really not all that legit. And, you know, like, anything about that you want to expand on, Owen?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue there, yeah, whatever you like. Yeah, the biggest issue there, I think, is that we are having a snafu with the definition of terms, right? It's like people aren't properly educated. They don't know what rights are. Some people think like everything, you have a right to, you know, like the most absurd fill in the blank, you know, statement, but understanding what a right is. And if you know, pay attention to Mark Passio and several people who are in that space, people who talk about like libertarian values and what those actually are, self-ownership as an example, what morality is, and defining it from as an objective as possible perspective, that I think seems to be a big piece that's missing. Because if we're using different words, or if the definition of the same word means something different to both parties when they come together and have a conversation or an argument or a debate, then it doesn't really matter. Nothing's ever going to get resolved, because what one person assumes as a right is something that someone does not define as a right, but they're using maybe the same term as, these are my rights, this is human rights. So they even have a human rights festival in my hometown, and I'm like, but I'm pretty sure none of you guys even understand what an actual right is. You know, you're just saying, oh, these people have the right to healthcare or food or whatever, and it's like, well, is that actually true, or is a right something that, you know, you have because you have free will and volition? And that's what actually your rights stem from. And I think a lot of people don't understand the basic framework coming in to talk about any of this stuff. And that's why it's such a damn mess. You know, it's just like semantics are a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know what the other person means when they say the same word that we have clearly defined in our minds.
Sure. And I think there's a real entitlement mentality woven into this. You know, like I have a right to, you know, healthcare or whatever. Is that true? What are you entitled to actually? How does that differ from your right to free action, free speech, as long as you're not hurting another? You know, your right to make a choice to exit a system, or, you know, things like that. Are there different things?
Yeah, because if you're claiming that you have a right to healthcare, then you're claiming that you have a right to someone else's labor. And that's actually not what a right is. You're not entitled to the fruit of someone else's labor. You're entitled to the fruit of your own, right? Like whatever it is that you create, you know, and you co-create with other people, you're entitled to that. But you can't just assume and claim what someone else has done and say that that belongs to you now because you said so, right? Like, and where does that stem from anyway? Where do your rights come from? Why do you even have rights in the first place? Yeah. And these are questions that we need to try to find some common ground or definitions here. You know, this is how like NLP and a lot of the manipulative tactics and stuff work, is by, you know, using some of these different words in different ways, right? And basically influencing people in order to capitulate to your authority, right? So I think that's something that we could maybe try to highlight and share, like, and again, back to the asking questions and connecting. You know, if we have the opportunity to speak with someone who does believe that healthcare is right, like, I want people to be healthy. I really do. You know, one of the first things you can do to be healthy is don't eat anything that you see on TV that has advertisements for. You're not going to see a commercial for broccoli, man. It's just not going to happen, you know? And so eat broccoli, eat brown rice, you know, eat, you know, whatever. But yeah, when it's on TV 45 times during the, you know, football game or whatever, it's probably not healthy. There's a reason why they're advertising it. And it's because it's probably not good for you. But asking those questions, like, why do you think you're entitled to this right? What is a right in the first place?
You're going over the Socratic method, right?
The Socratic method, yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
Absolutely.
great. It
asking
really opens
questions.
people up. It really engages, the conversation, because it just seems like a lot of times, especially with the controversial topics, people are like so quick to, you know, pop that knee jerky, right? Or whatever, right? And
Brings
it
us
just
back to
sucks.
the feelings issue, right? And people
Yeah, but
just
yeah.
make logic, because it's, if you just draw your conclusion from a feeling, it's logical fallacy.
That's true. And it's difficult to navigate those things. We have our own triggers as well, like myself, right? Like I can easily I can feel it, my flare up happening from within. And I'm like, I gotta try not to react, right? Like be proactive, not reactive as much as is humanly possible. I mean, again, the responsibility I think is on us, to connect and to make that connection, or whatever, right? Like maybe it's not for you, or and you just want to talk about what you think, people should know. But if you really want to influence people, or maybe that's not even the right word, but to kind of get down to brass tacks, you have to be able to open up some space for them to share where they're coming from, because that's the easiest way to find where the glitch is in their logic, is like, let them explain what it is and why they have a right to this thing, and then eventually they'll come to their own conclusion, as opposed to being smacked over the head. It's almost like a religious, if you've ever been to church. Like I grew up in church, and every Sunday they're like trying to make you come to the front and, pray the sinner's prayer or whatever. And it's like, dude, like I think you do more damage than good by not giving people the opportunity to worship in private, to be who they really are, and to come to their own logical conclusions. But if you can give them the pieces, then they can figure out how to put the Legos together. But a lot of times they're missing something. And if you can sit down and be patient enough to just let them exhaust themselves, eventually come out with whatever it is that they think and why, then I think a lot of times it's easy to go, oh, well, you thought that a right came from a piece of paper. Well, that's actually, so here's my thoughts on it. I think that actually that they're inherent. We're born with rights, just by inhabiting a body. That makes me autonomous. I believe I own my meat sack here, and whatever that I do with it, that I'm entitled to the results of that, right? Like if I build a house, or if I make a ball or whatever, and then I can choose to give that ball away or charge someone money for it. Starting at like a very basic framework, because I love Mark Passio's model of things, and I think it makes so much sense. So much of the truth is so simple. And it somehow gets so complicated. I don't know how we got so far down. I remember when I started learning about this stuff, it blew my mind, because it was like, wow, this is so straightforward and it's easy to understand. But I had to reframe my worldview and my mind in order to be able to open up and accept it. The Larkin Rose stuff, specifically because of authority and the idea of authority, which I've always hated authority. Anything that's cool or tried to, been pushed on me, I've always kicked against it. And anything that's popular, I immediately, even if I love it, I still hate it. I'm like, no, I don't like it because it's popular. But not really having like an appreciation for authority is something that was very innate in me. But understanding what it would mean to not, and just the subtle ways that I was, conforming to authority that I didn't even see myself, because of the way that society is run and the hierarchies in place and such. I didn't even, it took me a long time to integrate that worldview into my paradigm, my whatever. So yeah, it's tricky.
It's like, who's doing the canceling? Who's the authority here that's making the decision to protect people from offense? And it's like a fine line in any entertainment or any sales or anything that has to do with social, anything that you want to sell, or, when you have an agenda or a goal interacting with people, people are appealing to your needs, to your wants, to your pain points. People don't watch a show or listen to a comedian if they don't feel something, right? And people want to feel almost anything, whether it's, people go to scary movies to feel really scared, to, people flirt on the edge of extremes. And so it's like Derek was saying before, there's, seems to be that this cancel culture is discouraging the edginess, although that being on the edge is sort of the whole point, at the same time. And then when we talk about canceling, who's doing that? And do they have the right to do that?
Or something like
yeah. Shouldn't we all make our own decisions about whether we want to watch something or not? Yeah.
I think we should. And yes, I think there certainly are small containers of influencing people when it comes to the whole who's deciding the canceling and stuff. But I think it's, older establishments that are kind of out of touch and outdated in a lot of ways now, that have largely made those calls. But I also think that we're seeing these social media companies that are kind of getting rolled into the legacy media as well, and they're kind of all sort of on the same team. And when you see every app that you're on put up a new profile banner and it's all the same across the board, then you've got to smell a rat at a certain point. Like, you got to see that they're all in line with each other. So whoever's pushing it, they just jump on whatever that bandwagon is for that time being. And it's unfortunate to see, but again, back to Larkin's point, it's like never been more obvious. And I think more and more people kind of start to see through that as nonsense. And especially when these people who have been canceled, or a large majority of them, actually come back and are bigger than they ever had been or would have been before, because of all the attention that they got from being canceled. So I don't know. It's pretty weird.
That could be part of a strategy too. Let's
absolutely
make a big hullabaloo around this person, ban them from this platform, and then watch them, rise up somewhere else and be bigger.
That's why I wanted to do this show, yo. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right. You honey trapped me. No, But yeah, I mean, that's a thing too. It's like people are talking about that on X now. It's like, oh, it's free speech platform, so get on there and say some real dumb shit that you're going to get in trouble for later. And that's not something back to the idea of strategy too, because people want to generalize and blame a group. And it's not that simple. It's just never that simple. There's way more nuance to it than just any one group. Fill in the blank, white people, whatever. It's not just rich people or whatever. It's a small, right. Which is the scapegoat. I mean, dude, that's so funny. Like, why would a white male go on the news and say, white privilege, and give away all our secrets? You know what I'm saying? Like, it makes no sense at all. Why would you do that? So, like, it doesn't take a whole lot of digging to know that that's a red herring. But again, it's not white people. There's certainly white people too who are doing this kind of stuff. So it's there's definitely calculated efforts that are happening. But I think a lot of this too is largely people just doing their social thing and wanting to be a part of something. So they'll just jump on the group. They'll just jump on the group bandwagon because it makes them feel like they belong and they're doing the right thing. And, we don't have to look far back to like 2020 to see, how angry people would be, even though they were uneducated about a topic, incredibly passionate about whatever their side or stance was, when they really couldn't have cared less if there wasn't so much social pressure to conform.
Yes.
But because of that social pressure, that made them feel like they were doing the right thing. And all those people, I'm sure if you ask them what side they would have, fell on in during Nazi Germany, which is like the cliche question. They would all be like, "Oh, well, I wouldn't comply," and it's like, but yeah, you probably would have. I mean, let's just be honest. Most of us, most of that, it's a very smart population there, and most of them conformed. And it's not really even about smarts at that point, right? It's about feeling like you belong. Everyone wants to feel like you belong. Nobody wants to feel cast away. That's a very innate thing. People, you could go back into indigenous cultures, and like that's the last straw, is being banished from the herd. So we have some very powerful wants and needs probably within ourselves to be accepted by a group. And it feels awful to feel like an outcast. When I was coming across Mark Passio's work in like 2012 and 2013, I was learning things that my friends and I had never ever considered. And I knew my friends at the time, they weren't thinking about this stuff. So I felt so isolated and alienated from the rest of society that it was very bleak. I got depressed. I think it happens to a lot of people. Really fortunate now that I've been able to connect and meet people in this world and talk about this stuff. And more so, I've noticed my family and other people around me, friends who have opened up a lot more to it over the past few years. And I think that's all really a good sign. I'm optimistic, even with a lot of the challenges that we face on a day-by-day basis, just because I see more and more people opening up and being willing to ask some of these questions, especially if we can present them in a way that's not threatening, like, "You're an idiot, you didn't know that." It's like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah, nobody wants to be attacked, right?
Right.
Called names and
Right.
Yeah, no one likes that.
right. You can do that in a subtle way, and maybe it's funny, or
Yeah.
find someone to mock and make fun of, like, some of these big leader type people, the Clintons or Bill Gates, or even Elon Musk, whatever. I think those are good people to kind of look at and rib. We can talk about rib, like, look at Klaus Schwab, man. Like, what in the world, dude? I mean, it doesn't even seem real.
Yeah.
There's like a real gift, I would imagine, as a comedian, to help people to laugh at themselves, right? And my experience doing like psychedelics, like psilocybin, that was one of the gifts that I received, was my ability to change perspectives, to see the humor in everything, but including myself, and to really sort of laugh heartily at my foibles and habits, at silly repetition of patterns in my life, and so there is a alchemical gift to comedy, and for people to be able to start to see themselves and shift your whole self-concept. Yeah,
I really love that. Yeah. With my comedy, I do a lot more self-deprecating type of comedy. Steve Martin would say that too, like, make yourself the joke, and then you're not offending other people, you're not insulting other people. But from my angle, anything that we can laugh about, we are no longer controlled by. As soon as we can laugh about it, make a joke about it, whatever it is, no matter how daunting or dark or traumatic it was, if we can laugh about it, it no longer has power over us. So it's a really powerful thing. And then people are also very receptive to ideas when they're laughing. And laughter lights up all four quadrants of the brain. And then right after that laugh, you can just kind of start putting some seeds in there, like, maybe they'll fertilize, maybe they'll water, over time, and some things will come out. I mean, that's like an advanced move. That's some like
real ninja shit.
Yeah, it really is. But it's something to consider. If you've got a gift or an ability to laugh, to make people laugh, then it's a great way to have these conversations, so that it's not threatening or accusatory or intense. It's like, I think that's really the thing that people want to avoid more than anything, is that tension. It's not even the topic itself, it's the tension that comes along with it.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable, and in comedy, you want it uncomfortability, because then when the punchline hits, like it's a bigger differential, but whenever you're talking to a person just regular, I think it's great to just, bring some levity to this stuff. And these are topics and ideas that I want to talk about. I want to talk about them on stage, but I also, I'm hesitant to do that too, because you can feel that tension happen whenever you take a certain stance. Even if the audience agrees with you on that stance, they still pull back, because in what you'll notice this in a lot of comedians, they'll use the buzzwords, but they won't take a side on it. They'll use that, like whatever that meme is or whatever that idea is in the public consciousness, as a trigger for a laugh, but they won't be polarizing that on one side or the other and like split the room, or because if you split the room, the rest of the people who are on your side, they're going to pull back too, because they all feel that energy, that tension, right? So they're like, I don't want to be on his team.
Well, they might play both sides, kind of devil's advocate on both, right?
I think that's brilliant, because now you're leaving it in the hands of the audience to decide, which is what it should be anyway, right? Like, you shouldn't, I think, and I used to think like this. I would see a comedian and be like, oh, I bet they think like I do, and then want them to have the same perspective that I do. And I think that's like a need that we have. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, now that I've been on the other side of the equation, it's like, I don't want people to know what I think. Honestly, I want them to come to their own conclusions. And I might have my own perspective and my own ideas, but it may not match yours. And I want to challenge both sides. And I think that's how comedy really used to be a long time ago. I would think that, if we went back into when I was kind of younger and watching a lot of it, it was very much, they would hit on both sides, and then somewhere in the mid 2000s and up into, late 2010s or early 2010s and on, it started to get more and more overt, the political aspect of it. But I think that it's more fun to just mention the thing and talk about it, and to take both sides. Like, it's great. Like, have an argument with yourself on stage and take this side and then take the other side. And that takes the pressure off the audience for them to have to choose a side, right? Like, now they are like, okay, well, this person's clearly a maniac, so I'll just sit here and laugh at them.
Yeah.
As they kind of come to their, but that would mean this, and then this would mean that, and then, oh my gosh, so yeah. And people don't even know, like, it's really hard to know what to talk about too, regarding like mainstream ideas and what's topical. But I think what is really cool is to be able to talk about things that are never kind of going to go out of style. Things like what we're interested in, philosophy and evergreen sort of topics. The fact that we don't know what reality is still, like, nobody can tell you. Science is over here doing experiments on the quantum theory. They're doing the observer effect, finding out that, reality is not a particle or a wave. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I mean, here we are, right? And so we can go super far down the road, but if we back the truck up, we're going to notice that we really don't know shit. I mean, we don't know anything about this experience, this existence, and really what it means. Existentially, we're all in a crisis here.
That's kind of our whole point of being here, maybe.
And that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. And that's kind of what we're here for, Leslie and I, and like just like taking a really balanced approach to these things, and like trying to widen the scope of these echo chamber conversations, and like have a like, hey, like, what's going on, folks? And we all know that, like, anyone listening to any podcast or media source or even reading a book, they might interpret it through whatever way from their level of cognizance and perspective and yada yada, right? So yeah, we're not here to like offend people, man. You just crack me up naturally, man. No, I love it, Bootsy. But yeah.
I love that too. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of this process I've been learning. I think a big reason why I went into comedy was just to learn about myself more. I've always naturally been had a disposition toward it and loved it and thought it was interesting. But coming from this like sort of whitewashed spirituality, these experiences that I've had where it's like light worker, ignore anything negative, sort of delulu, as the kids say, like kind of, perspective that's really, shrouded in piety and actual judgment, and really a lot of, I would say, just neglect and dishonesty intellectually and emotionally, right? Like just, I'm not going to acknowledge these emotions. They can't be real because, I'm just going to live in this
vibe or whatever sometimes.
Right. Exactly. So, comedy for me, it filled in that other side. And as I'm still weaving these two worlds together, it's a great way to learn a lot about yourself. I've said this a few times. It's like, if you want to attain enlightenment, sit down at a desk and try to write a joke. Your mind will go completely blank.
That's great. It's like morality as a word has become a dirty word. It's way too serious. People kind of think you're an old, curmudgeon, to talk about that. And, we're trying in some ways like to make morality cool again. And it's a hard job.
But morality is cool. Morality is voluntary, and that's consent. And consent is sexy. So you guys are on the side of, and again, like it's back to those words. What's the buzzword that's big? And that's a big thing that people are talking about now. Consent. Okay, well, we can understand that because that's kind of in the meme. So consent should be consensual in every aspect of your life, right? Not just in whatever you're talking about right now, but every aspect of your life. And that's voluntarism. Voluntarism is consent across the board. It's constant consent. Yeah. And maybe speaking that language to people who are in that world, but people are being gaslit too, to believe that people hate them. Like people in the trans community, as an example, are being told by people and influencers in that industry and in that world that people actively hate you for who you are. And it's like, not really. I don't think, I don't see a lot of people that do hate people because of whatever, right? And I'm just using trans people as one example. There's any community, pick your poison. The Christian community, the people at the top are like, people hate you because you love God. It's like, I don't think that necessarily that's that true either, right? Like, I mean, there certainly are going to be people who hate on people. There's a lot of ardent atheists out there too, but it's like, that gaslighting and telling people that people don't like them because of their views or because of what they believe or who they are, we all have to just drop that. I think that's one of the things that kind of has kept me from, busting out and saying what I want to say a little bit more, on stage. Because we all kind of, that's rat poison. And we
it's
all
like
need
a program defensive-ness already, that people are stepping in on the table with.
Yeah, and that will cause you to self-censor because you're afraid, to say whatever it is that because somebody's going to be mad.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time sometimes talking about women, or having a women's circle, right? Or talking, it feels like I'm treading on delicate waters just to speak about my own experience as a woman, right? Using the word woman. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
What is a woman, Wesley?
Exactly. Like, anybody who wants to call themselves that.
Right. Well, I think it's super funny too that like the conservative movements jumped on this soapbox like they're slam dunking on people. And it's like, dude, can we back this up and talk about something that matters? Again, back to ethics, morality, what a free market is, as opposed to like, oh, well, there's only two genders. Well, wow. I mean, give them a trope. Wow. Incredible work.
No, there are more than two genders. You are behind.
Well,
I'm teasing.
I hear you, but like that's the funny thing about it is like we're gonna go down this road and make this huge argument and spend millions of dollars to troll.
And we're arguing about that over here while all this shit's going on over here.
Priorities.
Right.
Matters to all of us, you know.
Right.
Total distraction.
Exactly. And so yeah, it's funny to me that people want to go down that road and really not solve any problems, but just instead just incite people and stir the pot.
Yeah, for me, it's more divisive than, you know, solution oriented. And these people might be programmed or thinking they're actually, you know, out there social justice warriors or whatever flavor of that kind of compartmentalization in terms, semantics, whatever. You know, we understand what's going on. And to bring it back to what you guys were saying with, you know, some of these like, you know, I mentioned like, you know, people are putting up these, you know, shields in like, you know, auto or pre self-defense for things, you know, oh, the haters and this and that, or like, you know, oh, you know, obviously like people are, you know, throwing out, oh, racist, you know, just like off a fucking whim. And it's like sometimes it doesn't even seem like these people understand the definitions of it. But to back it up, like, you know, what I mentioned before with Dave Chappelle, you know, like he got hella flack from the, you know, the LGBTQ community, even though he was poking a little fun at it a little bit, but he really reeled it into the real life interactions and had a good friend who was trans or whatever, and he put her on stage to do, you know, stand up and this and that. It sounds like you're familiar with the story, Owen. You're nodding your head to this, and like, like, apparently, you know, there's like, you know, even more flack from that and whatever, and she committed suicide, and it's just like they kind of shot themselves in the foot as far as like, you know, going for a cause that they thought was righteous almost, you know, and they made a big deal about nothing, and someone's life is over because of that.
Yeah, there's an interesting saying in comedy where they say you should always punch up, right? Like you should punch up and never punch down. But that creates a bit of a problem. What's down? Who's down? Who's below you? And who's above you? Right? Like, and if you can't take a joke, where does that put you in the scale? So are you saying that, you know, you can't make jokes about these people because they're unequal, they're less than? So like that's, you know, that's offensive to say that. But if you can joke about them, now that's offensive too, because you're joking. You know, I try not to, I try not to really write checks my ass can't cash, right? Like I'm not an expert on anything in that world, right? Like I, again, you know, just want to connect and talk about things, and whatever someone's, you know, worldview is, or how they dress or appear or how they identify, to me, it really doesn't matter. And I think most people are there, but again, you know, we're fighting against people who are telling people that people are aggressively upset at them for whatever their lifestyle choices are, when in actuality that really has much less to do with anything in that whole world of, you know, the offensive thing. But, you know, it's like always punch up. Well, what is up? Right? Like, I mean, I make Biden jokes, but that dude has clearly got dementia. Is that punching up?
I thought it was down, man.
Yeah, I mean, Biden, I mean, when he falls down on it by himself. What? And so if I make a Biden joke, that's the president of our country. That's a huge authority figure. But look at how pathetic he is. You know, that's like,
exactly.
That's like making fun of a three-legged dog. You know what I mean? Like,
that's so sad. You're so mean.
Exactly. I'm like over here, I'm not trying to kick a puppy. You know, that's not going to help anybody. But at the same time, like, who's down and who's up? I guess that's my point there. And so if everyone's equal, then you should be able to joke about everyone. And if it's funny, it's funny, right? If it's not
people
funny,
talking about equality all the time. What's up with that, yo?
Right, exactly. I know, it's such a good point, right? It's pointing out this huge like inconsistency in the logic. I mean, and emotional intelligence includes being able to be able to take a joke, and to be able to deal with offense, gracefully and and be able to face conflict or talk about things. There's a lot of social skills and interpersonal skills that I think are getting bypassed or not valued with this whole cancel culture kind of mentality.
Yeah. Can I
Yeah.
say something real quick? Because it's just
Yeah.
off the top of my head, and this is for the listeners out there, because like maybe you guys can relate as well. But yeah, growing up, people have, just like amongst their friends or whatever, colleagues, you're at whatever job sites and this and that, you're passing the time in a very mundane way sometimes, and people are gonna crack jokes about whatever the fuck is on their mind, or whatever the hell the mood that they're in. And like people have made weird jokes towards me, or had weird attitudes towards me, and I used to be offended about it. I used to be really like, what the fuck is going on? What's wrong with these people, kind of thing. And then I had to take a step aside of just like, why am I taking this so personally? And maybe it's just something going on within them that they're projecting onto me, because they don't, what they said wasn't necessarily true. It's just like, and why did I get it, pissed off about something that isn't true about me when it says some dumb shit? It's a bad look on them in the
Mm-hmm.
end. So I'm kind of just taking a different approach and flipping the script on it and be like, you can look back at that person face to face and be like, hey man, like, is there something, like, I'm not that
Yes.
person that you think I am? And like, can you, like, what was
If you
going on in your
approach,
mind with that?
yeah.
Like, let's kind of deal with this or whatever. I'm not like offended by it, but yeah, like, and what does off-ended mean? You hear this, easily
Often.
offended, right? Being, are we not being able to like stand on solid foundation of true gnosis of ourselves and eternal principles and axioms of natural law and this and that? If you're on that, between the two pillars of enlightenment, masculine and feminine, then we're not going to be fucking, off-ended, because we're standing, firmly on, solid ground that
Yeah, with
we
your two
cultivated within
legs,
our
your
soul,
pillars
our life. Yeah.
planted. Yeah. It's like embrace your weirdness, know yourself, have confidence. If you have confidence in yourself and know yourself in all your uniqueness, right? You're not going to be as easily offended. It's a little bit of a shield.
Well,
Yeah.
it's taking personal responsibility too,
Yeah.
like people want to be offended. Some people do, like they get off on it. They're like,
Yeah.
they want to
No.
be triggered, they want to be offended and upset and yelling and about something that who knows if it's even based, like who knows if it's even at all true. They just want to be inflamed and upset and have someone else outside of themselves to blame, because then they don't have to look inside. And
Yes.
it's hard, and my heart goes out to you, whoever you are, right? If you're afraid to look inside and take some responsibility, but we all have to do it. And the more people start to do that, the more problems just go away. They start to be solved on their own.
It's the heart of the matter.
Small. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's like this huge defense mechanism that distracts you from yourself. It's a huge distraction from self-work and seeing the reality of our world. Because, and if we're truthful, it's shitty. There's a lot of shitty things out here. And if you can focus on like this one little, you can make the shittiness that you're focusing on it like a game over here. You don't have to focus on all this stuff that's real over here. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah,
it definitely makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it too, is a game, right? Like our attention is a game too, and it's something that we need to be very cautious with. What game are we playing with our attention? Because if we're getting triggered or getting upset or focusing on a lot of negative things, then that's going to change our emotional state. It's going to put us in a position where we're probably going to be less humorous about things. We're going to be more intense. We're going to be in that weighty energy. We're going to feel like people are against us. But if we feel like we're on the same team, then it changes the whole thing, right? Like if we can feel like we can connect with anybody, regardless of their views on the, the jab or whatever, then it kind of eases that tension, and then it becomes a lot easier to share what we believe and what we think, and especially if we're open to hearing what the other person has to say. If you want to be heard, you have to be able to listen to somebody else, and they have their reasons, and you might not agree with them, but I think we have to lead by example. Again, back to our own responsibility. We can't blame social media or the mainstream media either, just as much as I can't blame the audience because they didn't laugh at my genius fart joke.
That's right. Yeah, although it was really funny, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I love how you brought it back into like self-responsibility and all that. And we understand like, there's propaganda and stuff. And I know you're old school, you're older than me. I'm 40 years old, born in 83. Mon ami. Mais oui.
You look good.
Out here in France, man. Sorry. Whatever.
I like it. That's
Thanks.
hot.
But yeah, it's like people play themselves sometimes all the time if they don't, truly like know themselves or just not like properly aligned or balanced, and aside from all the onslaught of, it's like, back in the days we're getting played like Sega, right? And that was what, 64-bit, 24-bit. And now today kids are getting played like, the ultra augmented AI, whatever the fuck. And so like you take whatever, we've been used to, just like apply to today. It's just such a different landscape of how things have been things have been exploited beyond belief in this augmented way of technology and all these things. And people and celebrities, they're on social media as well. They're kind of more like available, or they're people are seeing more than what they're used to. And so I think that also plays into this holding people accountable, which we're all for, and that is part of that responsibility first and foremost within the self, right? And but yeah, it's been seem as like so overboard sometimes with this, like holding people accountable because they said one thing. And like aside from all these celebrities, we have this cancel culture thing has dipped down to the more microcosmic scale of just like regular teachers getting fired over like really trivial or bullshit that yesteryear that would never pass, right? Have you observed anything like that, Owen? And like this could be in like any job field or whatever, right? So
yeah, I think you make a really good point. There's so many influencing factors, and I think that's where people really need to just dig into themselves and just ask themselves these questions, like what are my thoughts and ideas? Like influencer. Well, they take that word influencer, it's they can't be telling you the truth.
What?
They can't be telling you the truth that they're an influencer. You know what I mean? Like that can't be the case. It just can't. So most of us, we identify with our impulses that we have and the ideas that we think are cool, that we've been told are cool by these influencers, celebrities, people on social media. But I think by backing away from that and asking ourselves, like, what is it that I really want? Who do I really want to be? And what is it that I want to share? What do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? How do I want to impact the world? What legacy do I want to leave behind? That changes the perspective, And when we're young, we're impressionable. There's a lot of just disastrous stuff out there. Like I can't imagine. Like I don't have TikTok on my phone, but I know, younger people. When I was in like middle school, I looked up to the high schoolers. When I was in college, in high school, I looked up to college people, just the people that are a few years older. So, you've got all these influencers on TikTok and Instagram and stuff. And so the people who are just a few years younger than them are always looking up to those people and kind of conforming to what it is, right? Like when I was in high school, Dave Matthews was really popular, and that's what all the college kids would go and see. Dave Matthews, they'd have their checkbooks in their back pocket, and I couldn't wait to put on a button-up shirt and untuck it with some khaki shorts and go dance to a Dave Matthews show with a checkbook in my back pocket. And that was just what was popular at the time. That's what I thought was cool. And so that never ends, you know, but I always looked up to Generation X so much because they just didn't give a shit about authority in general, right? Like they were, as much as the latchkey kid thing, you know, was a trope, it almost was more of a backfire because they started to become more autonomous and think for themselves as a result of having that time alone and away from authority in general. So I guess that was a positive influence during my upbringing. But I know that there's a lot of stuff that's going on too. And it's like parents might think their kids are just learning dances off this, but you know, who knows what they're actually watching on live on TikTok. And that's kind of scary, you know, to get into all of that. But yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people who are pushing against that too. And the younger generation, when I do comedy, I'll ask them if they're on the apps, like the dating apps and stuff. And I'd say the grand majority of them are not on the apps. They're dating now because they kind of came and went for them. You know, like they're not dating online. They're dating in real life more again. And yeah, which is a good thing. It's positive. And I think people are starting to see through that, you know. In 2020, we were on our phones and on the internet so much that I think everybody kind of got exhausted from it, and they're like, we want to like really live, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point. You've used the term older establishment and legacy media, and I wanted you to define that a little, and then share what is the new establishment, and you know, what are the differences, and how do we need to approach both, I guess.
Sure. So from my perspective, and this is just my opinion, I would say like the legacy media would be, you know, CBS, ABC, mainstream news, NPR, anything that we hear kind of old school. Like my grandparents watched the news and they really bought it hook, line, and sinker when I was younger and growing up. You know, Walter Cronkite said it was so. Yeah, and right. If they and it had a lot more credibility back then, to be honest. It was done a lot better. But I think that's kind of being rolled into the social medias too, Facebook, Instagram, you know, anything that those companies are going to endorse is establishment. Anything that's creating the tech that we're using, you know, these platforms that are free, that we're basically the products of that we're using, would kind of fall into that category. As far as like what new media is, I think that's always changing and it's always going to change. It's almost like we have to jump into the next lifeboat before that lifeboat gets picked up by the big ship and put into that, you know, that thing, right? Like it's Rumble now, I guess. But what happens when Rumble gets bought by YouTube, you know, and then now they start doing the stuff to you know what I mean? And so it's this never ending game.
Step ahead all the time, right? Yeah,
and I think that's the challenge, is to try and stay a step ahead, and or to be smart enough and use the algorithm in such a way where you're not shooting yourself in the foot, right? Like if you're going to use these outlets like Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and I've learned this the hard way because I've been shadow banned like crazy on YouTube. But you know, there's a fine line. Maybe you just choose what you're going to talk about. And certain topics, you don't talk about those publicly. You know, that's what private content's for. And it's an opportunity too to say, hey, look, I'm going to monetize something that I'm really want to share, but I can't share it on this platform because of the rules of the platform. So please, you know, give me a few dollars and check this thing out. This is something that, you know, is a deep topic or a deep dive. But again, you know, still being careful of all that, especially with all the new you've seen all this, all these new laws being rolled out in Europe and stuff for hate speech and stuff like that. And that's very dangerous. And, you know, kind of going back to the whole, like, oh, you said something online 8 years ago and we're going to bring that up now. It's like, I don't know that I really trust any of these apps, even Signal or Telegram, honestly, because at any point, it's like they're going to cooperate if the FBI says, hey, we need to see their messages or whatever. So, I mean, it's all kind of legacy. It's crazy because, like, before 2013, I was basically living in a van down by the river, quite literally, and by choice. I was a raft guide for years, and I still love whitewater rafting. It's super fun. But we've only been on these smart devices for like 10 years, and look how far the invasiveness of the privacy has gotten. It's just insane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I just advise people to use caution a little bit in what you talk about. It'd be really easy to get in trouble if you know the right words to say or the wrong words to say, I guess, in this case. So it's just a matter of discretion. Like, use the platform for what that platform is good for, and don't try to kick against the pricks unnecessarily. That's just going to shoot yourself in the foot. Certain conversations may be better in private than publicly published, even though people are thirsting and hungry for the truth. If you're gonna, wind up getting in trouble for something, then maybe just don't put it out there. Learn from my lesson, because I have definitely said and done things on YouTube that the algorithm did not like, and I could have just not taken a stance on that. I could have just been like, you know what, I'm just not going to discuss this topic, and I'll talk about it on some other platform or something where it won't get me in trouble here. But I don't know. I see the future of kind of all these platforms cooperating more and more with each other. So that's a problem. I mean, I don't like that, but I hope that these lifeboats continue to kind of come out. Like, I think Rumble's great at the moment. Rockfin is a platform that I use and stream the podcast on. I really like Rockfin and several of these other alternatives. The thing is most people, and myself included, it's just so convenient. I can open up the YouTube app, it streams to the TV, and most of my favorite creators are still on YouTube. But it's just a matter of just being strategic, I think, about it. It's unfortunate, because you want to just be able to just bluntly say whatever. And that should be okay. It should be allowed, because if people are preaching a bad message, like, they should be allowed to be an idiot. You should be allowed to be such a moron that you alienate yourself from the people that that would have otherwise followed you, like, and be publicly seen for a moron,
because that's respecting
ideas.
It's respecting the listener. Like, I really don't want someone else to decide what I'm mature enough to listen to, or what I'm smart enough to discern or not, right? Or to make my own choices if I'm offended by something. Like, why does anyone or any particular platform feel that they have the right to make those decisions for me, or you? It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Well, it's insulting to us,
Very
frankly.
insulting.
It dumbs us down.
It is insulting.
It makes us all dumb. It's like, whoa, you're not smart enough to decide what is real and what's not.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, hold on a second now. Like, if I can't do that, then we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
That's the least of our problems, is you're censoring it, videos on YouTube, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to go out in society and even, use a bathroom properly. So, we're going to have a big mess on our hands.
I know.
Yeah, Owen, I love what you brought up in it. I can say that, you've been hanging 10 transurfing and all that good stuff, my friend. I love that. And please share with me afterwards. I can post a link if you have any videos about that. I love that. I've been watching Mario West's series about, the actual book that's been translated regarding transurfing. It's really pertinent, just, for someone to, implement into their lives and just like navigate this reality and within their own selves. And speaking of one's own self, I mean, doesn't it seem like this cancel culture thing, ultimately kind of leads into canceling the culture within oneself.
Hmm.
And
I think,
culture is kind of a loose term, you know,
yeah,
it's more like freedom of
yeah,
expression, if you will, with this, context.
yeah. I think it absolutely does, and that's a creative problem too, right? Like, because now you're not allowed to ask questions, you're not allowed to, consider different perspectives. It's funny, like in a lot of the media, like when you work on a Netflix project or whatever, the people who are in the writer's room, they have a different set of rules. They, sexual harassment's not a thing for them. They can use words that, other people on the set can't, because they have, because they're in a creative space, a creative container. So their rules are different. So I think that should be true for all of us. I think that opens up the space to be more creative, and in order to access like genius thoughts and ideas, and whether it be in the form of painting or art or animation or music, whatever, you need to be able to explore new territory in the quantum field. The Transurfing book was a big mesh of worlds for me, because it's like a spirituality that's individualized, right? It's not collectivist spirituality. It's about you and you accomplishing your goal and finding your goal and the door to it. And one of the things he says later in the book is that to stop trying to change the world, stop trying to fix the world or save the world. You can't, but what you can do is find your goal and be on the path to it. And whenever you're on that path, he says, it makes your life a celebration. It's not the goal, attaining the goal, that makes your life a celebration. It's being on the path to it and falling in love with that process. And, and that has a lot to do with presence and a lot of the Eastern stuff. I love the Tao and Buddhism and, a lot of these other ideas as well. And I see that from a practicality point. I'm actually reading a couple books right now by a guy named Trevor Mawad. And he has passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a mental trainer for a lot of the greatest athletes that and also some of the football teams, Alabama's football team, Georgia's football team. He has two books. One's called It Takes What It Takes, which is my favorite of the two, and the other one is Thinking Neutral. But his point is thinking neutral. Like, that's what he is espousing. And that's really what transurfing is about, because whenever you idealize something, you're +1 in discrepancy from 0. Like, this is where reality is. If you have contempt for it, you're -1 against 0. So there's a discrepancy there, and that will always have to balance. So this is why we always get what we don't want. Negative thinking always gets negative results every single time. But positive thinking doesn't always get positive results. Sometimes it's delusional to think positively. Like, for me to be like, well, think positive. I know you're running a marathon tomorrow and you haven't trained at all, but you're going to be fine. Like, no, you're not. You need to train for like 18 months in order to be able to run a marathon. Yeah, or more. I don't even know how long, but a long time. But I like the idea of thinking neutral, knocking things back into neutral, not getting too excited or upset in any moment, and being able to just kind of pull back a little bit. That I think is really helpful as far as the idea of presence, right? Like, they talk a lot about presence in Eastern philosophy, and the Tufte book talks a lot about it too. But really, the point of presence from a practical perspective is to create the future that you want. If you're present now in this moment, then you can actively use the tools. But if you don't know how to manage your attention and your mood, really too, in the now, then you're going to have a really hard time creating great future circumstances for yourself. But from a very practical position, it's like, just do the next task. And when we're on that path towards our goal, and that goal for Russell Wilson might be to win a Super Bowl, right? But the goal for us, it might be something completely different. But understanding each part of that process and being completely devoted to that activity, the next step, whatever that is going to get you so much further than trying to get a dazzling outcome, than to worry about the goal itself. and instead start to focus on whatever that process is, whatever those steps are, in order to get to that next place. So that makes it fun, and it takes a lot of the pressure away too from this outcome based type of thinking. So yeah, all the Transurfing stuff rolls really well into Trevor's work, because his dad was a big time influencer in the whole positive thinking, positive psychology. He was a trailblazer in that whole world in the 80s and 90s. And then you know, Trevor grew up where in that world where his dad was very adamant about it. So he kind of was trained up from a very young age into that. And he even does this experiment on himself in the book, It Takes What It Takes, where he tries to go 30 days listening to country music, media, you know, fear-based stuff, watching, you know, horror movies and stuff. He couldn't even go 20, he made it 26 days before he completely broke. And he was noticing like the way that he was communicating changed, the way that his outlook was so much bleaker. And he was doing an experiment on himself to prove neutral thinking, you know, and to prove the negative to himself, you know, as well, and to make sure that his work was solid. And literally 26 days is how far. He couldn't even make it a whole month on what the media that I would say the majority of people are consuming on a day-by-day basis.
Yeah, it's like the guy that ate McDonald's for a month or something. It makes you feel sick, and
yes,
sometimes we need to maybe experience a little of that to get the contrast, to bring us back to that neutrality and that equanimity. And it really brings it back to the self-awareness, personal responsibility, choosing your path, choosing.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough. The circumstances, many of them are out of our control. Many of them are not what we want. But in every moment, we still have that choice, really. And his argument is like, if you really want to do whatever it is that your goal is, you really don't have many choices. You know, if you want to be a professional golfer, you don't have the option whether you're going to go and hit balls today. You're going to hit balls today.
Yes.
Or else you're not going to be a professional golfer. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
that's just it.
Get out of the fantasy. Yeah,
exactly. I don't get to not write jokes. I don't get to be a comedian and not write jokes. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things are really not even a choice if you really want to, you know, go down that particular road. But if you learn really what Vadim's saying and identify your goal, then that makes your life a celebration. And if you can make that an internal goal instead of an external goal, then it's way, way more fruitful and productive and more fun, because then you don't have this pressure to like win a Grammy. Do you want to win a Grammy? Of course, any musician would love to win a Grammy, but what does it take to win a Grammy? You know, you want to write a brilliant song. You want to be a brilliant songwriter. Focus on that as a goal, and then the Grammy may or may not come. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Who cares? You made a genius song, and that's the beauty of it.
It's like focusing on what you have control of. Where is your locus of control there? Yeah. So I think we're at the point to tie things together and end our conversation. I think it's been a brilliant conversation. I really appreciate how you've woven in these principles and deep concepts into this topic. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share?
I am a nerd. That's what but it's fun. No, I really appreciate being able to talk and really explore some of these ideas and topics. I love what y'all are doing, and I just want to encourage everybody to take some time for themselves. You know, one of the biggest struggles that I had is I'm such a helper, and when I was working in production, I'm a type 2 on the Enneagram, if people know what that is. But it's someone who is very good at intuiting other people's needs and helping them to attain outcomes and work well. I work well with others. But I needed to take time for myself. I wasn't giving myself the time and attention that I needed to develop the things that I valued in my own life. So I just want to encourage everybody to, you know, take that time. If that's waking up every morning and writing morning pages, or getting some sort of a practice down, or taking a day where you go and do something that fulfills you. If that's, some activity outside or going to art galleries or studying, old films or whatever weird, train fetish, whatever you have as far as, as far as, as far as your interests go, but like feed your soul, make yourself a priority. And I would say like be very cautious and guide your mind and love yourself enough to know what is toxic and don't let that in. There's a movie called Apocalypto. I think Mel Gibson was responsible for that one, if I'm not mistaken. But in the very beginning of the movie, this kid is having this nightmare about these people coming to colonize them. And I think it's either his father or grandfather, it's like the head of the tribe, comes to him and says, don't let the negative in, don't let that shit in. And I would pass that message along because it's just not worth it. It's not going to help you. If it doesn't help you, then just block it out. It's not about being ignorant. You can acknowledge something and know that it is that way without giving yourself over to it emotionally, right? Focus on that locus of control, as you said, Leslie, so brilliantly, right? Like what we can control and work on that. And, the circumstances are going to be what they are, and they're going to be difficult. They're going to be what what we don't want. I lost $100,000 business in 2020. It sucked. It was not fun. But if I did it once, I can do it again, right? I've built skills in order to put those things together. So whatever happens next, I'm going to do the best that I can with the tools that I have. And I hope that everyone else will love yourself enough, please, to give yourself that time and space, whatever that is for you. And I think that will really improve the quality of your life, which, that's all we got anyway. So I just wish everybody the best. And I really appreciate you all for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, Bootsy, well said, brother. I really appreciate your energy, your humor, your good
Your
vibes,
heart.
and all that great stuff.
Yeah. Where
Yeah, the whole locus of control. Real quick, it just seems like there's certain things out there that can have an impact on like our focus of certain things, and these things can consume us and create certain cyclical energy or emotional patterns sometimes, and that can really burn people up. And just what you said, it is such a great solution to these things that any given person has probably dealt with in their lives. So yeah, had such a great chat with you all. Leslie, I'll let you finish it off. I'm just
Yeah.
still marinating in like just some of the funny shit you said, man. Like, it's just
Yeah. Everybody check out your
love
work.
it, man.
Check out Owen Hunt's work, Bootsy Greenwood. Yeah. Take a few minutes and share where they can find your stuff.
Sure. I am online at Bootsy Greenwood on all the platforms. BootsyGreenwood.com is my website. If you go there, you can get a very short, brief, concise little ebook or audiobook that is about finding your purpose, your reason why. I'm a big fan of finding purpose for people. Is a big thing that I've emphasized when I'm coaching and doing that type of thing. Check out the Ikigai. You can see that there's a big graphic on my website. What you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for and what you're good at. That's like a matrix. And I would say jot all those things down, and also jot down the things that you're not good at, that you can't make money at, that you don't like doing, right? Like see the contrast and see what it is that you want to be doing. How do you want to spend your time, as opposed to thinking like, what do you want as a goal? How do you want to spend your time? If you want to be a record producer and you don't like rapping cable, then maybe you don't want to be a record producer, right? But BootsyGreenwood.com. My podcast is Blue Collar Mystics. So you can check that out, but it's on my YouTube channel. I've got a bunch of audiobooks that are free. I've got a bunch of audiobooks on Amazon and Scribd or Everend, as well as iTunes and stuff too. So if you're looking for a good book to listen to, the Tao Te Ching or
Kabbalion.
Kabbalion is on there.
That's like a must read for everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely a great book. And Emerson's Self-Reliance too is fantastic. I highly recommend.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
I find it funny that you don't use the near name Owen anywhere.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story about that because, you know, there's a character on the show Grey's Anatomy named Owen Hunt.
Oh.
And so if you Google Owen Hunt, that's who comes up. It's not me. So Bootsy Greenwood is actually my stripper name.
Yeah, exactly.
I want more. I want to know more about that.
Right. So I'll tell people how they can derive their stripper name. It's the first pet you had, and then the street you grew up on is the formula that I use. I'm sure there are others out there too, and I would say play with any of the formulas to make the best sounding one. You know, like don't limit yourself. Paint outside the lines.
I'm Muffet
yeah.
Pembroke.
Pretty right.
Damn, no.
Pretty good. Yeah, it works a lot of the time. It doesn't work every time. Sometimes I'll do that in live and I'll ask somebody and it'll be just some terrible. Sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna search that after the show.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Owen, Bootsy Greenwood, the blue collar mystic. So glad to have you. Good discussion. Look forward to interacting in the future. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Derek.
Take care, y'all.
Yeah, and thank you all listeners. All right. Have a great day.
Ciao.
And Chris Jansen says hello, by the way.
Oh, I love Chris. Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Word, yeah.
Yeah. He wanted me to ask you about transurfing. And so I was about to bring up transurfing the same time Derek did.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Perfect.
I need to reach out to him, shoot him a message. If he wants, or if anybody does want, I've got, some links and stuff for that audiobook. It's on a couple of different platforms. Still, it's around. People have uploaded it here and there. So I've been found some of those links on some different alternative type streaming services and stuff. So
awesome.
I'm happy to send those over.
Yeah,
it's a good one. It's long, but it's
right.
It's good. It was the one that stoned me.
Yeah.
Damn, that's awesome.
Natural stoning.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any magic on the mountain around Shasta in the future? You guys going to do that again, or?
We're not doing it this year because there's the eclipse in Texas.
Ooh.
And I'm going to that one. Yeah, it's in Utopia, Texas, and
wow, cool.
I think it's the first week in April. Yeah, I think that's right. And so Magic on the Mountain was scheduled to be in May. It's like the next month. And so I was like, dude, I really want to do the eclipse thing. And we talked about it, and they were like, yeah, those two events are really close together. They had a big push there with a lot of these events. They just did Egypt. I mean, they've done a lot of really cool events. And when I found out about the eclipse one, I was like, dude, I really want to do that. So I'll be out there for that in Utopia, Texas, like April 4th through the 6th or something. And then I'm going to be hitting some spots on the way. I'll hit New Orleans and Houston and probably Austin and a couple other places and do some comedy too on my way out there. And then hang out for the eclipse in Utopia, Texas. The eclipse is supposed to go right over where we're camping.
Yeah.
Wow.
I live in Northern California, just an hour south of Mount Shasta. So if you ever come up this way again, and Chris is up there now too. We'd love to connect.
Yeah, Chris is out there too.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I knew that he had moved up there, and we had talked like just briefly before I went over before the last Shasta trip, and I meant to reach out and maybe see him. We got to see a couple people, Jen and Ben from the Legit Bat podcast. They live out there, and they're really fun and funny people. And I really like their podcasts a lot. So they're up there in Redding.
The Legit podcast it's called?
Legit Bat.
Huh. I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
Oh, some neighbors.
It's good and edgy. It's a good that'll be a good exercise in the free speech podcasting. But they're lovely, amazing people. Jen and Ben are just awesome folks. I adore them.
Word.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I have my daughter's been coming in during this class. So I gotta go give her some attention.
Yeah, fair enough. I gotta run as well. I gotta hop on another call.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day and your holiday.
Thank y'all.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, much love.
Awesome. Thank you. So great talking with y'all.
That
Have a
was
wonderful night.
Likewise, yo. Thanks again, brother.
Talk to
Bye.
you soon.
Bon
All right.
dimanche.
Ciao.
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 I just discovered that I identify as a sapiosexual. If you don't know what that means, I'm single. I'm single because I'm complicated, you know? I am. I think, therefore I am alone. It's tough, because I want to tackle the big questions, you know, the existential stuff, like, how are we like enlightened, infinite consciousness radiating in this dream state that is this strange reality wrapped up in a meat suit with a stinky, dirty butthole? It doesn't make sense. Am I the only one? I don't get it. You know, I can't help it. I have to think about this kind of stuff. It's weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm trying to think of what we have in common, you know? And everybody poops. Everybody also wipes, and everybody looks.
The goal of cancel culture is to make decent Americans live in fear of being fired, expelled, humiliated, and driven out of society as we know it. If we want to do good for our generation, let's not start with bullying, but rather with a conversation. To hold people accountable for their actions, but not push them to the brink of ending their own lives for mistakes they have already learned from. If you want to make a change in the world, that change starts with no one else but you. Now go make the world a better place.